This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha.
We have a picture of her as a 16-year-old.
Dispossessed of their own land.
We had to start making, guesses.
The Cherokees have persevered through numerous adversities, and we're still here.
Whether you've got one of your own, the word hometown evokes a range of thoughts and emotions. That's certainly true for Erin Whitson, a Missourian born and raised in the small Ozarks town of Steelville. Erin is also an archaeologist who has been researching and coming to terms with two facts around her home state and hometown. Missouri has the most miles of the Cherokee Trail of Tears, and Steelville was on that path of forced removal. A new episode of the film series My Ozarks tells Erin Whitson's story of working through attachment to her hometown and the brutal and still relevant history of the Trail of Tears. And she joins us now to talk about it. Erin, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We also have Sharon Benoit. Sharon is a member of the United Keetoowah Band of Cherokee Indians in Oklahoma and a former district representative for the band. She worked with Erin on finding and telling the stories of her Cherokee ancestors. Sharon, welcome to the show. So, Erin, I'd like to begin with you. You grew up in the Ozark region. What is it that you knew about the Trail of Tears and its route in rural Missouri as a child?
I think we were told that they came through, but not much more than that at the time. Still, today, not much more is shared in schools, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. And it was primarily through school that you heard this information?
Yeah, through school. They don't really talk about it. We don't talk about local history a lot in schools anymore, so I think it was a mention, just, oh, by the way, they came through,
Mm-hmm. And what is it that you were trying to find when you started this research in Steelville?
So I had questions about removal. I've been told that you can't do archaeology on removal because they were only here for a short time, a lot of times only a single day. But if we can do archaeology on the Santa Fe Trail or the Oregon Trail, why can't we do archaeology on removal? Mm-hmm. And not much is known about it. And so I thought trying to figure out more about what the lived experiences was like was important.
Mm-hmm. Sharon, can you share with us what your connection is to the Ozarks region?
Basically, the only connection that I have to the Ozarks region is it's close to Oklahoma, Indian Territory, northeast Oklahoma. And as far as the information about the Trail of Tears, and I have a lot of Cherokee history embedded in my brain, and I grew up, I'm full-blood Cherokee, and grew up in the old traditional ways of the Cherokee people in northeast Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And the Ozarks, as far as the connection to the Ozarks region, it's like I've said, our first settlers settled in Arkansas and in the Missouri areas. And when we talk about the Trail of Tears and the Cherokee history, the Cherokees basically owned or lived in the eastern regions of the United States and covered about 8 states as we know them today. And according to what history tells us, and is that the Cherokees at one point in time were fierce warriors in the eastern part of the United States. But when during the Trail of Tears in the early 1800s, when laws came into existence and the United States government decided to move the Cherokees into Indian Territory, Oklahoma, as we know it now, was designated as Indian Territory, and it was set aside as a reservation. And the plan was to move all American Indian tribes onto this reservation, Indian Territory, and that was before Oklahoma became a state. And as a part of that, the Cherokees, being one of the 5 civilized tribes, there were laws passed to where they moved the Cherokees from the eastern part of the United States onto Indian Territory. And that's what we talk about when we talk about the Trail of Tears, that this was, there were several trails. There wasn't just one. And there were movements of people voluntarily moving from the east onto Indian Territory, different regions. They moved to Texas, they moved to Mexico, because they knew that it was inevitable.
Right.
That the federal government at some point in time would take over their land.
And so there was a lot of people then, Sharon, I'm sorry to interrupt, but insofar then as the number of people who are moving through, it was vast numbers. And so when Erin did reach out to you, I'm curious about sort of the very personal connection that you have. I understand that when Erin reached out to you and you started doing some work with her, that you actually learned more about one of your ancestors who survived the Trail of Tears after her parents died. Can you share a little bit about that?
We have an ancestor that came over on the Trail of Tears, and she arrived in Indian Territory as an orphan. And according to research and the records we find, she was probably about 4 or 5 years old. And the Indian commissioner at that particular time was trying to find a place to place her and several orphans because her parents had died en route. And my interest in preserving the Trail of Tears, we have no idea where these people are buried. There are numerous people that are buried along the routes because there were over 4,000 people that died on those routes. And with her, we have a picture of her as a 16-year-old, and we have the family lineage that goes all the way back to Red Clay, Georgia. We traced our family lineage all the way back to Red Clay, Georgia. Anyway, that was a part of being interested in what Erin was doing. And as a paraprofessional, I was trained to look for certain things to determine whether this was an actual site where the Cherokees had camped. And with Erin can tell you more about, why the archaeologists worked so hard to prove that these were areas that could be declared as historical sites, because you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get that done.
Right.
And as a part of the research that we did, I like to think that we did a lot of research with the material that we had and proved that these were historical sites. These were places where people camped. Up to 1,000 people at a time camped in these areas. And when they moved them, they were very ill. And it was during the winter. The hardships can't even be described as to what these people went through. And these are our ancestors. And when I wrote a paper, and the title of the paper is that the Cherokees have persevered through numerous adversities, and we're still here. And the meaning of perseverance is to persist, to continue to exist, and to go on resolutely in spite of difficulties. And that is what my ancestors did. And that is what that meant to me, to do that research. I'm not sure where these people are buried, but I would like to pass this information on, to my descendants, for my children and my grandchildren, to understand and to know that someone suffered, someone really came through some hardship for them to be here. And like I said, I'm full-blood Cherokee. And for my parents for to be here, And that is a part of the research and being a paraprofessional and trying to preserve the Trail of Tears I want people to know, what we came through, what our ancestors came through,
right,
what they survived through, and that we're still here.
Now, Erin, what Sharon has been talking about, and then in particular with Sharon's ancestor who passed through the Ozarks, what is it that your research indicated about that ancestor, and how did you determine what the camps were like and how it is that they persevered?
So there are a lot of questions that we still have when we're doing this research. Let me preface this with that. But when we got into doing the research for this, we started to realize that we've only got accounts, first of all, from 2 detachments that came through, and we know that there were over 10 that did. And the accounts suggest that at every stop they're losing 1, 2, 3, 4 people at a time, and most of those people would have been older folks and children. So their culture's taking a hit from both ends, with that as well. We set off to try and find sites like this because no one has ever done it before. We didn't know how to do it. And so part of it is just trying to stand in these places and figure out, okay, if it were me, I'm a human being, they're a human being. Like, what would I need to do to survive in this particular environment? They came through in the wintertime. And so we had to try and work out the logistics of that. Some of their options would have been limited based on what the landowners, the white landowners at the time, would have allowed them to do. There were some landowners who refused to let them stay, So these 2 particular areas, we did have landowner agreement. It seems like they were more sympathetic to the plight of the Cherokee as they were through here. And they hit this part of the Ozarks and things really got bad with sickness. So we had to start making, guesses on what sick camps would have looked like while they were here.
And we'll get to some more of those details later, Erin. We want to say thank you to Sharon Benoit, who's a member of the United Keetoowah Band of Cherokee Indians in Oklahoma and a former Keetoowah Band district representative. She worked with Erin on finding and telling the stories of her Cherokee ancestors. Sharon, again, thank you, and thank you for sharing about your ancestors with us today.
Thank you. One of the things, if you have a minute, I would like to emphasize on.
Actually, why don't you stay with us? We need to go to a very quick break here. We'll be back shortly to continue this conversation. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
Welcome back. Before the break, Sharon Benoit, who is a member of the United Keetoowah Band of Cherokee Indians in Oklahoma, you had just a final thing that you wanted to share with us.
Yes. One of the things that I wanted to clear up is that there are 3 Cherokee tribes federally recognized in the United States, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. The Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in North Carolina, and then the United Keetoowah Band of Cherokees in Oklahoma, and then the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. And the Eastern Band was federally recognized in 1939. The UKB were recognized in 1943. And the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma was not federally recognized until around 1973. But and the blood quantum is the difference. Each tribe has different blood quantums. But that's one of the things that I wanted to emphasize on, is that the United Keetoowah Band, Cherokees of Oklahoma, the tribe that I am a member of, we have to be at least a quarter blood, 1/4 Cherokee to be a tribal member.
Right.
And that was what I wanted to clear up.
Sharon, thank you for sharing that. And because you've mentioned it a couple of times that you are a full-blood Cherokee, we appreciate that clarification. Now, Erin, before the break, you were talking a little bit about what is known and what is not known. But when it comes to the research process, what is it that you were trying to find when you initiated this research? I mean, was there something very clear that you were going for?
So we had accounts that suggested that we had these camps here, but we didn't know where. I think the tracts of land that we have 2 sites, suggested that, somewhere on this 100-acre property, they stayed here, and somewhere on the other one, there's probably close to 80 acres. So part of it was just trying to figure out, how do you find these sorts of camps? Because we know that they litter Missouri, right? And they litter several other states, but we don't know how to find them. So part of my project was trying to dig in, how do you locate these spaces and where on the landscape did they tend to be? And that sort of gets in again to what was it like to be in this space in 1837 or 1838? And that's sort of what my project explores a little bit.
No, archaeologists are known to dig. You identified some sites, but there was no digging happening. Why is that?
So understandably, this is a sensitive topic, right? We're talking about ethnic cleansing and arguably, depending on your definition of it, genocide. 1/4 of the population of Cherokee folks died within the course of a few months. So it's an intense thing to focus on. So we had conversations with the Cherokee Nation and the United Keetoowah Band of Cherokee about what they felt was most appropriate for this project. We offered them the opportunity to test some of the results, and they were still a little unsure about how they felt about it. So we agreed to avoid digging or ground disturbance until they felt better about it. So still to this time, we haven't dug at all. But
Now, the reason we're talking with you is that you and your story are part of a film series. And my Ozarks film director, Gabe Sheets, told our producer, Ala Kuziz, that your relationship with where you grew up and history that's not part of what you knew about Steelville is really at the heart of what makes your story both compelling and important.
What I thought was really interesting, I guess, is it's really, to me, a story about what home is. So even the archaeological project, it's about the Cherokee being dispossessed of their own land, of their own home, and having to kind of find and make a new home in this area that the federal government forced them to, west of the Mississippi. And so you kind of have that storyline of home paralleling with Erin's relationship with her hometown, which is struggling and might not quite understand why somebody is putting all these resources into historical research when in the present it has its own issues. And so Erin's kind of balancing act of really trying to champion and protect her town, but also challenge her town, right, to maybe try and reconcile with some of its past sins. It's really interesting, but more than that, I think it's really important.
And that was Gabe Sheets, director of the film series My Ozarks. Now, Erin, I understand that you are not in a position where you are wanting to speak for anyone else, and that was part of the reason we wanted to be sure to talk with Sharon Benoit, who was one of the people that you consulted with. Now, Gabe also noted that the history with the Trail of Tears is not necessarily something that people in Steelville want to talk about. So how is it that you do talk with community members there about this history? I mean, what comes up in those conversations?
So for a lot of the people, it's a tragic history, but they've got issues in today's world that matter more for them and their families. And so you have to make it, connect the dots from, your lives have hardships sometimes too. And, we're not the only ones who've lived in these areas who've also struggled. So I think that helps a lot when you're talking to people about this stuff. I think showing clear relationships between, hey, your ancestors were here and, they engaged with these people. I think that helps as well. I don't know.
And in our final minute, Erin, this film is going to be showing in St. Louis at the Cinema St. Louis Filmmakers Showcase on July 27th. What do you hope people walk away from the film with?
I hope they have a respect for this moment in our history's past, because it does matter. Even if it was, over 180 years ago, it matters because lives were lost and families were broken. And those moments have long, profound effects that still haunt today. And it haunts, across the board. It haunts from Cherokee Nation in the west to Eastern Band in the east. But it also, I think, haunts the communities that were touched by this, but, in between those two places. So, remember that history is important to keep an eye on when you're telling stories about this stuff, because it's not always black and white. And that we need to preserve these places as best we can, because they're not renewable resources, they're not places that will just shift to the side if a road comes through or a cell tower is placed there. So be careful of our activities in areas that might be close to these places.
All right. Erin Whitson is an archaeologist from Steelville, Missouri. Her story is featured in the film series My Ozarks. Erin, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
The episode of My Ozarks we've been discussing today will be screened as part of Cinema St. Louis's Filmmakers Showcase on July 27th at the High Point Theater.
Today's segment was produced by Aula Kuziz.
Audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.